everyone. Welcome to the Audible Podcast, the quarterback analysis. I'm Big Italy 42, here talking about some top quarterback plays for this weekend, courtesy of @ZachScottMoxie on Twitter, one of our great NFL writers here. Starting off the top here, Tom Brady, 9,200 on FanDuel, 83 on DraftKings. Did fine in a tough matchup last week. Of course, Patriots with a huge total once again, 29.5 points. And this is Brady on a Thursday night, of course, facing a Dolphins team who has looked great in the last 2 weeks. And it's not a great matchup for Tom Brady. Dolphins allowing just 15 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, 14th in passing yards allowed, and 15th at points allowed per game. But Tom Brady, as you know, as reliable as they come, he's all about throwing the ball for volume if necessary. He's got elite weapons in Julian Edelman, Rob Gronkowski, and even LeGarrette Blount making not last week so much, but 2 weeks ago caught a touchdown pass. He's got Deion Lewis. Hopefully he'll be back for this one as well. Brandon fell off the PUP list, so definitely plenty of weapons for him. And as we know, this is it's a big rivalry game. Obviously, the Patriots with a nice, healthy lead in the division, but get this win here, and you're in really good shape. Tom Brady, certainly, as always, one of your top options on the week. Next up, Phillip Rivers, who Zach says he's by far the top choice on the Sunday slate. 8,500 on FanDuel, 66 on DraftKings. Leading the league in passing attempts by 24, averaging 44.42 attempts per game. Vegas team total 23.8, but Rivers first in passing yards per game, second in touchdowns. Ravens are an elite matchup for quarterbacks. They've gotten absolutely shredded, giving up fantasy points in bunches. 26 in points allowed per game, almost 27. 283 passing yards per game. And Chargers here, and this one's supposed to be a fairly close game. And Rivers, as we saw, horrible in the first half last week. Had one of the best fourth quarters you'll ever see. Obviously, the game was still never really that close. I mean, it ended up being a one-possession game at the end, but that's all anecdotal because the game was never really in doubt for the Raiders. But either way, this is a guy who's had now 2 big games in a row. It doesn't really matter when the production came. It's been there. So got to like Phillip Rivers here in this game. Value cash game play. He's got Matt Stafford in here in the London game against the Chiefs. Chiefs have allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers and 265 passing yards per game. Vegas team total of just 20 in this one. New offensive coordinator coming in for Stafford. So we'll see how much the offense changes. It's been a frustrating go for the Lions, really, on offense and defense. And Stafford has played well over the past 2 weeks, well enough to pay off his cheap price tags at 7,500 FanDuel, 58 on DraftKings. And Calvin Johnson emerging. We saw Lance Moore for a couple weeks have some big games. Eric Ebron had a huge game last week. So he has weapons. It's just a matter of the right play calling and being able to get the ball to these guys. So at his price tag, he's certainly worth a shot there. Ryan Fitzpatrick next, 7,400 on FanDuel, 52 on DraftKings, 23-point Vegas total. Fitzmagic hasn't got a whole lot of respect here, but averaging 245 yards a game, 11 touchdowns. Chris Ivory questionable for this one. If he doesn't go, Fitzpatrick going to have to throw the ball even more. Had 2 straight big games, and the one game that Ivory sat out, Fitz threw the ball 58 times, 283 passing yards and 2 scores. Raiders are last in the NFL in passing yards per game at 304, and we haven't seen a 300-yard game yet from Fitz, but this could be the one, especially if Ivory sits out. He's going to need to throw the ball, and it's a great matchup here for him as well. Next up, Matt Ryan at $8,000 on FanDuel, 71 on DraftKings, 27.5 point Vegas team total here. Ryan only has had 1 game over 20 fantasy points and 300 passing yards, none with more than 2 touchdowns, but he's still 6th in the NFL in passing yards per game, and this team averages nearly 28 points a game, which is right around their Vegas team total for this week. Tampa Bay is not a bad defense, only 220 passing yards per game, but they're also allowing the league worst 29.8 points per game overall. They've allowed the second most touchdown passes at 15, 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, and Kirk Cousins absolutely shredded this team last week. Yes, Kirk Cousins. So Matt Ryan in a good spot. Certainly going to have a defense that's kind of back on their heels after being exploited by Mr. Kirk Cousins last week. Next up, Andy Dalton at 81,000. Might as well be 81,000 the way he's playing. 8,100 on FanDuel, 6,000 on DraftKings. Bengals with a nice Vegas team total of 25. As we keep saying seemingly every week, kind of waiting for bad Dalton to come back. He hasn't come out yet. He's been incredible. 2nd most fantasy points per game behind only Mr. Tom Brady. He leads the league in passer rating, 294 yards a game. He's thrown 14 touchdown passes, Steelers only allowing 18.7 points a game, but are allowing they're 27th in passing yards allowed with 277, 11 touchdown passes, and this is the kind of measuring stick game we've been waiting for with Andy Dalton. He played well against the Seahawks, but a team he's traditionally struggled against each year is the Steelers. So if the Bengals can get this win, huge for them in the division and huge for confidence for Andy Dalton. So this is definitely going to be one where we can see if Andy Dalton really is for real this year. Value GPP plays, as you know, I love Brian Hoyer here. He's back, $6,900 on FanDuel, $53 on DraftKings, 25.5 Vegas team total. Last week, another one of those guys, horrible start. Really had a big second half and ended up paying off his price tag. Ryan Mallett now gone. They say it's because he missed the flight. I tend to think it's because he was sitting there just as an awful teammate. He wasn't cheering for his team. He was mad he got benched. Hoyer's a better quarterback anyway. I don't think anyone's going to miss Ryan Mallett. And Arian Foster being out, that's unfortunate, but 49 throws last week for Brian Hoyer. And the Titans are only allowing 195 passing yards per game. But that's on only 163 passing attempts. So this is a team that's been terrible against the running game. So they're giving up 23.2 points per game. This is a defense that has played well, but all of a sudden we see the Texans, who have had some really low team totals this year. It's a nice team total this week. So DeAndre Hopkins, weak game last week, but gotta imagine it's gonna be a pass first attack now. So he should be able to get his against the Titans. Next up, Joe Flacco, last player here, 7,400 on FanDuel, 55 on DraftKings, 26.8 point Vegas team total. Flacco's had some good games and some bad games. 9 touchdowns to 8 picks, only 16.1 fantasy points a game, 265 yards passing. He's second in the NFL in passing attempts, which is absolutely insane for those low numbers that he has this year. But the Chargers defense may be the worst in all of the NFL, 28.3 points a game, 363 yards. Flacco likely going to be throwing down the field a ton, going to have plenty of chances to rack up some points in what should be a pretty competitive game with two really bad defenses. So hopefully this helps you out a little bit. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out Zach if you got any questions for him about this article at Zach Scott Moxie on Twitter. And we'll see you next time.